Picture this. You're scrolling through your phone looking for something, an old contact, a receipt, anything. And then it happens. You find a photo of yourself from 5 years ago, maybe 10, maybe longer. And something in your chest immediately tightens. Your face does something you can't fully control. You might even make a sound out loud, alone, in a room by yourself. And the strange part is, that person in the photo wasn't doing anything wrong. They were just living their life, wearing what they wore, smiling the way they smiled, being exactly who they were at that moment in time. But something about looking at them now feels almost unbearable. Why? Why does a photograph, a harmless frozen image of a moment that's already gone, have the power to make you want to close the app and put your phone face down and never speak of it again? The answer has nothing to do with how you looked, and everything to do with something happening deep inside your sense of who you actually are.
Here's the first thing you need to understand. The person in that photo is not you. That sounds dramatic, but psychologists mean it almost literally. Your sense of identity, who you are, what you value, how you see yourself, is not a fixed thing. It changes constantly, slowly, invisibly, year by year, shaped by every experience you go through, every mistake you make, every version of the world you're exposed to. Researchers call this the psychological self, and studies show that the way people describe themselves at 20 and the way the same people describe themselves at 40 are often so different that outside observers struggle to believe they're talking about the same person. Which means when you look at an old photo, you're not just seeing a different hairstyle or a different outfit. You are looking at a fundamentally different self, a previous version, someone who existed before certain things happened to you, before you learned what you've since learned, before you became whoever it is you are right now. And your brain knows the difference, even when you don't consciously register it. Your brain looks at that image and immediately signals, that is not me anymore.
But recognizing a past self doesn't fully explain the cringe. Lots of things are different from the past, and we don't cringe at them. So where does that physical, almost involuntary discomfort actually come from? It comes from something called self-discrepancy theory, developed by psychologist E. Torrey Higgins in the 1980s. The idea is this: your brain is constantly running a quiet comparison between three versions of you: the person you actually are right now, the person you think you should be, and the person you want to eventually become. When those versions are too far apart, when the gap is too wide, you feel discomfort, anxiety, shame. Not because anything is wrong with you, but because your brain is registering a distance between where you are and where you feel you ought to be. Now apply that to an old photo. That image doesn't just show you a past self, it shows you a self who didn't know what you know now, who made choices you would no longer make, who cared about things you've since outgrown, and sometimes who had no idea what was coming. The cringe is your current self looking back at a version of you that couldn't yet meet your own current standards. It's not embarrassment exactly, it's the gap, the visible photographic evidence of the gap. Here's something you've probably noticed without ever putting words to it. Not all old photos hit the same way. Some old photos make you laugh. Some make you feel warm, nostalgic even, grateful. But certain ones land like a punch. And the difference isn't the quality of the photo or how long ago it was taken. The difference is what that photo represents about who you were at that specific moment. The photos that cringe the hardest are almost always from periods of transition. The years where you were between versions of yourself, where you were trying on an identity that didn't quite fit, where you were performing a version of who you thought you were supposed to be, rather than who you actually were or were becoming. Teenagers feel this the most, young adults too, because those years are almost entirely made up of trying on selves and discarding them. And photographs are merciless. They freeze the trying on moments in perfect detail and keep them forever. But here's what's interesting. The photos that embarrass you the most are usually from the periods of your fastest growth. The awkward, uncomfortable transitional phases are the phases where you were changing the quickest, where the gap between who you were and who you were becoming was at its widest. The cringe is almost always evidence of growth. Here's what I want you to sit with for a second. That person in the old photo, the one making you want to close the app, they were doing their best with what they had, with what they knew, with the version of the world they were living in at that moment. They didn't have the benefit of everything that came after.
They didn't have the perspective you've built since then. They were navigating with an incomplete map in a version of your life that hadn't finished writing itself yet. And somehow, despite all of that, they got here, to this moment, to the version of you that's sitting here right now watching this video. That person in the photo did every hard thing that needed to be done to eventually become you. The cringe you feel isn't really about them. It's about the distance you've traveled since. And the further you've come, the harder the cringe hits, because the gap is wider, because you've grown more. So the next time you find one of those photos and your whole body tightens up, maybe instead of closing the app, you take one extra second and you say thank you to the version of yourself who had no idea what they were doing, but kept going anyway.
Everyone has a photo like that, one that makes them wince before they can stop themselves. And now you know exactly why, and what it actually means about how far you've come. I want to know yours, not the photo, obviously, but the era, the phase, the version of you that makes your current self physically uncomfortable. Drop it in the comments, even just the year, even just a single word, because I promise you, you are not alone in this, not even a little bit. And next time, we're going somewhere that sounds like a simple curiosity, but lands somewhere genuinely profound. Why do certain smells instantly take you back to a specific memory, one you hadn't thought about in years, with a clarity that no photograph could ever match? The answer is one of the most fascinating things about how the human brain actually works. That one is coming soon.